Hey guys, and welcome to my Garuda guide. Garuda is one of the most versatile warframes in the game. She's capable of doing pretty much anything and is kind of a jack of all trades. But the main point about her is that she has a way to generate infinite energy and therefore make all of your abilities completely spammable. So, I'm going to showcase a few builds with Garuda, and all of them follow the same premise, which is we're going to subsume one of her abilities and supplant it with some sort of Helminth ability. So Garuda's first ability is Dread Mirror, and it is a very powerful and useful ability that does a whole bunch of things, and it has an augment that is pretty tricky to pull off, but has some pretty interesting effects, but I'm not going to get into that right now because it's not part of the build. And what the ability does is, first of all, it's going to pounce on the enemy that you're aimed at, with a range that is dependent on your ability range modifier. And it creates a Dread Mirror. And the Dread Mirror is this mirror that you see aimed towards where your reticle is pointing. So that you could, if you turn around, then it's going to be behind Garuda. So it depends, again, on not the direction that the Warframe is facing, but the direction that your reticle is facing. It kind of tracks your reticle and follows you around. Now, there's the initial pounce adds a certain percentage of the enemy's max health as damage stored in the heart that you see floating on top of the mirror. This pumping heart stores damage both from the initial pounce and from any incoming damage that comes through the mirror. Now, any damage that comes through the mirror is completely 100% nullified. That includes self-stagger, status effects, crowd control, any melee and ranged attacks, and it converts a portion of it into damage that gets added to the heart. And when the mirror goes away, as it just did, the heart maintains the damage indefinitely until you actually use it. And you use this by holding down the ability, and it acts as a damage scaling nuke grenade. So even by just pouncing on two enemies, it's already charged 110k. Let's just do another one just for the sake of it. And now, when you hold down the button, it charges it and drains your energy. And it charges it even up until the point where you run out of energy. And as you see, that just nuked everything with 2 million damage. And the radius is really, really significant. You can clear rooms about this size at max range by just throwing your grenade in the middle of it. And in addition to that, the grenade damage type is considered weapon damage. So what it means is that several abilities that interact with weapon damage benefit from this. Now, another thing I'm going to note is her passive. If you can tell, above the ammo, there's an icon that is filled and is slowly draining. This is her passive, and it corresponds to up to 100% damage bonus on weapon attacks. But two of Garuda's abilities are considered weapons in terms of this damage. So, for example, this is one of the interactions that you can take advantage of it with. And I'm going to get into one or two others further down in the video. But for now, this damage applies to weapons, and her first and fourth ability count as weapons, so it applies to those as well. It boosts the damage of the first and fourth abilities. It applies to melee and ranged weapons as well. So it's a pretty powerful passive, a very powerful passive actually, because it's multiplicative to the weapon damage mods. So, for instance, Serration, it's not additive to Serration, it's multiplicative with Serration. So at a 100%, you essentially double the damage of the weapon flat out, pretty much. Her third ability, her third ability is the way that she restores energy. So by tapping the third ability, you gain a certain amount of energy that corresponds with 25% of the health lost. So you sacrifice 50% of your max health, and you gain 25% of your max energy. you could use it again, and it cannot go below 2. So once you use it twice and you're at minimum HP, you're unable to use it anymore. As you see, it says need more health. So how do you get more health? Well, that's where her second ability comes in. So her second ability requires an enemy, and you put that enemy on a spike, and it essentially becomes a beacon that heals you over time. So what you would do is you would drain your health to restore energy, and then you would heal yourself with enemy beacons that you create that heal you. That's essentially the Garuda loop. And her fourth ability, which is pretty interesting and one of the most powerful abilities in the game, is a debuff that you apply to all enemies in addition to slash damage and slash procs. And what this debuff does is that no matter what type of damage you deal, it adds extra slash procs to the enemy. So if I hit things with her melee weapon and it generates electric procs, those electric would also have a chance to generate slash procs. It's pretty difficult to show off, so let me just do this again. Okay, so first let's debuff all the enemies. Now, any type of damage whatsoever that an enemy would take, so for example this electric damage, can generate slash procs. As long as they have that debuff active. This yields some pretty interesting interactions, and it's also self-boosting. So if you deal damage with the fourth ability, and they have slash procs, now if you deal more damage, then that damage, besides the fact that the ability itself adds slash procs, any damage which this ability also deals adds even more slash procs, so your weapons and other abilities are going to add more slash procs to the enemies, and that it has synergies with several Helminth abilities. Now, one more thing I didn't mention about her third ability is that it also clears all status effects that are affecting Garuda. So if Garuda has toxin AoE, or if she's burning, or if there's magnetic status, or anything like that, as soon as you use your bloodletting, her third ability, it clears her of all status effects, so that you can have health and status cleansing and debuffs to the enemy and infinite energy. That is her base kit. Now, where she really shines, though, is when you subsume other Helminth abilities onto her, which then you could utilize the infinite energy loop to power those abilities. But that begs the question, which ability do you replace? Her first ability is insanely powerful and is one of the main parts of her kit in terms of negating damage and storing damage into her grenade. Her fourth ability, as I said, is one of the best abilities in the game. So you can't get rid of either of those. And both her second and third ability work in tandem to restore her energy and health respectively, and restoring health is required to also restoring more energy. So it seems pretty cut and dry, and that you can't really replace any of these abilities, but where my innovation comes into play is that I've been using Molt Reconstruct. This is the secret to making Garuda insanely powerful. So what Molt Reconstruct does is it heals yourself and allies within affinity range 6 health for each energy point spent on the initial casting cost of abilities. In other words, every point of energy that you spend on any ability that you cast, besides the third ability, but that doesn't really matter. Any of her other abilities will essentially restore her health to her and allies within affinity range. So this one arcane is a complete flat-out improvement over Blood Altar. So Blood Altar has an 80-meter range. I don't know what affinity range is, but I'm pretty sure that it's more than that. The heal radius is 21 meters, so absolutely affinity range is more than that. And the Blood Altar can also heal your allies, but only if they're within the 21 meters. This one is way more reliable. Additionally, this heals health per second, but Molt Reconstruct just heals you instantly. So there's no issue with needing to wait in order to spam your abilities. Molt Reconstruct, whenever you cast any ability, you restore your health back up. That allows you to restore your health even without Blood Altar, and that makes all of her abilities spammable, as I'll showcase right here. So, let's simulate a few more enemies. Now I could tap my Bloodletting, third ability. Now cast my fourth ability, restore my health. Third ability, I lose health. Fourth ability, restore my health. Third ability twice, I lose health. Fourth ability, I regain my health. This means I don't even need to cast her second ability to restore health, meaning we have a way more superior way of restoring health, so her second ability is completely useless. This means that any ability we can subsume in her second slot is going to be a freebie for us, just because of Molt Reconstruct. This arcane just makes Garuda insanely versatile, and this solves her main problem with her kit. And it's just a perfect synergy. There's no words for how amazing this synergy is, really. It's gonna blow your mind when you play Garuda this way. So, before I get into any of the actual builds, let's talk about her Prime Talons. In order to gain access to the Prime Talons, you're going to need to have no melee weapon equipped. If I equip a melee weapon, they're gone. So they are essentially the replacement for your melee weapon, but they're so powerful that you might consider actually using these as your melee weapon, because they're insanely powerful. So for her Talons, I'm going with a melee influence build. I recommend copying this exact configuration. Now, Drifting Contact might be flexible if you're using something like Naramon, but other than this, I think everything else is mandatory. You might debate Primed Reach as well. You could replace this with something else, but really, after a lot of trial and error, this seems to be the best setup for Garuda Prime Talons. And what you're going to do, I'm not going to go into detail about melee influence builds in general, you could look it up, but they're pretty much the meta right now as far as melee is concerned, because they're able to deal a lot of damage once you reach full stacks with it. And Drifting Contact is there to add another 10 seconds for comfort. But as you see, by attacking one enemy, all the other enemies are taking damage. That is how the melee influence build works. I'll spawn even more enemies to get even more combos, so it could show you even better what it could do. It deals a lot of damage in an AoE. And now, if we debuff them first, now look what it does. Pretty much wipes everything out. Because every bit of damage also adds slash procs, and those slash procs are proportional to the damage dealt to them. It's pretty crazy. Okay. Now, to some of the more interesting builds. This is my favorite one, and it's pretty counterintuitive, but we're using Atlas's Petrify. Why? Because Garuda already with Molt Reconstruct and Bloodletting has infinite energy with just those two. And she has her first and fourth abilities to deal damage and boost her weapon damage, and also her passive to boost weapon damage. So she has everything she needs right here. So this slot, because it's so flexible, you might want to put utility stuff here. And that is usually what you're going to do. But this is one of the best utility abilities in the game, because with its Augment or Gaze, you now have a loot drop chance bonus on petrified enemies. And it also adds 50% damage vulnerability, and it adds insanely powerful crowd control. It's just a really flat-out amazing ability to add to Garuda's kit. And I can show you how it would work. So you would simulate. So you would. Let's just heal ourselves back up by using this ability a bit. Now, these turn into stone. So if I'm using something like Elatum, which I want to charge for its Incarnon form, it's very easy for me to just headshot them, gain Incarnon charges, right? But not only that, it does multiple things, all of which are really, really great. So, first of all, it crowd controls the enemies, making them very easy to hit. They don't attack you. Mitigates damage because they can't attack you. The CC is pretty powerful. They're frozen for a very long time, relatively, and they drop more loot. But not only that, but when you petrify enemies, you scan them. You have a certain percentage towards scanning them for the simulacrum. So, as you can see, there's a bunch of enemies that, for me, are locked. I haven't unlocked all these enemies. So if you would want to unlock these enemies, what you would need to do is you would need to scan a certain amount of them. And scanning them is a pain in the butt. But with this, just running around as you normally would, you have infinite energy, you can spam this as much as you want. You just run around during a mission, and you just, as you run around, petrify everything before you kill it. It scans it the moment it's petrified, so you don't really have to kill it for it to scan. It just scans the moment you cast the ability. And as you go through the levels, you just gain progress towards all of these various monsters, and you don't have to put in any of the effort of manually scanning every single one of them. So that, in addition to the strong crowd control, and 50% damage vulnerability, which is insanely huge because that's another multiplier that adds to your passive and to all the other damage sources. Yeah, this is a pretty crazy ability, and the one that I would suggest that you subsume the most. This build is one of the most fun. And extra loot is always great. So here's the build. I'll explain it a little bit. Arcane Blessing is flexible. You could replace this with something else. I just personally like to have very high health. So this happens whenever you pick up health orbs. And why isn't it healing me all the way to full? This is odd. Anyway, it gives you what amounts to 1.5 thousand health, and that is enough to keep yourself immune to damage and tank a lot of damage in general. One thing I forgot to mention about her fourth ability, sorry that I'm getting sidetracked here, but let me show you something. When I'm using the ability, my health goes gray for a little bit, right? What's going on? So while I hold down the fourth ability, my health is gray, meaning I'm immune to crowd control, I'm immune to incoming damage, I'm immune to status effects, I'm immune to everything. I'm untouchable while my health is gray. And as you can see, my health is only briefly not gray. So it's only a very short duration during which I can even take damage at all. And what's interesting is because of Molt Reconstruct, let's say I'm now at 2 health. This is when I'm the most vulnerable, right? But by pressing my fourth ability, I both heal back to full, and I become immune to damage at the same time. And because while I'm in airborne, I can press my third ability, cleanse all statuses, become immune to damage, heal myself to full, and shield gate all in one. So she can essentially tank level cap easily by shield gating, combined with having decently high health, and constantly making sure that you're as immune to damage as possible. And of course, casting speed does help with charging the ability faster to get to the point where your health is gray faster. Okay, so that along with Dread Mirror makes her able to tank insane amounts of damage, but Arcane Blessing makes it a little bit more foolproof. So even if you mess something up, you have enough health as a backup so that you can soak a little bit of health, soak a little bit of damage before you use your give you the opportunity to use your fourth ability to heal yourself back up and your third ability to cleanse statuses, etc. So Brief Respite is for the shield gating, Molt Reconstruct is for healing back to full, fourth ability is for damage immunity while these two are kicking in. With all of these, you are completely immune to damage 100%. As long as you can keep spamming your fourth ability, which leans towards a caster playstyle, but not necessarily. You could also be a weapons platform playstyle if you rely on the front-facing Dread Mirror to make sure you kill everything in front of you in your field of view in front of you, so you don't take damage through Dread Mirror as well. And that's good for firing weapons and being a more shooter playstyle, or using a melee playstyle with her insanely powerful talons. So max range, it doesn't need any explanation because all of her abilities are based on range, except Bloodletting. But Bloodletting it is the only ability that isn't affected by range. Of course, it depends on what you subsume, but generally, many subsume abilities are dependent on range, so just go with max range. It's a no-brainer. Also, that's what enables the Dread Mirror to be such a crazy nuke. So, Blending Talons is a pretty essential part of this kit, because, as I said, your immunity to damage depends on how quickly you can cast her fourth ability. But how quickly you can cast her fourth ability, well, you need to hold it to aim, and that takes a while to charge to full to get to the maximum range, right? And her fourth ability is cast only in a cone in front of her. But this augment allows you to tap the ability, to cast it in a radius around you rather than a cone in front of you. So it makes it more reliable when you're inside a group of enemies rather than when you want everything to be in front of you. So this is more reliable in applying things in a radius, and honestly, this tracks more enemies when you do it this way. And it also allows you to tap it to cast it instantly, so you don't have to charge at all. So there's no charge time whatsoever. It heals you back to full and gives you the immunity instantly. You don't have to charge. This makes everything, again, more reliable, more consistent, and I believe this is a essential part of the build. You can't go without it, because sometimes you just need to tap in order to get immunity from a certain, so that you can deal with a certain situation, and also heal to full instantly, instead of tapping, instead of holding, wasting some times, stuff like that. Archon Continuity, you need extra duration. Blind Rage is also 100% necessary because we're going with Molt Reconstruct. So this also requires some explanation. Blind Rage gives us a lot of ability strength, meaning we don't really need Molt Augmented or anything like that, because our ability strength is above 100, and she has enough damage sources. This doesn't really matter. Remember that whatever damage you deal at 139 ability strength is multiplied by her passive. So again, that might as well count as using a fourth ability that is 278 ability strength when her passive is at full. So you don't need to go that crazy with ability strength, but what Blind Rage does give us is negative ability efficiency. And this is amazing, because at 45 ability efficiency, Seeking Talons cost 155 instead of 100. And Petrify costs 116 instead of 75. So 155 times 6 is 930, if I'm not mistaken, health restored instantly. So when you use your third ability, let's try to stack up some more health. There we go. So her third ability drains half of the health, and my fourth ability will restore 900, which is more than half. So there you go. I'm healed back to full every single time. So negative ability efficiency, she can spam all her abilities as much as she wants anyway. So efficiency doesn't matter in the sense of energy conservation. That doesn't matter to us whatsoever. But negative efficiency means more healing from Molt Reconstruct from all of the abilities that you cast. So that is pretty huge. That's why this is absolutely necessary. Primed Flow as well, absolutely necessary, because her max energy determines how long you can charge her Dread Mirror for. So if we fill our energy all the way back to full, look how long we can keep it held up and stacking more and more and more damage. Note that it drains energy, and when it runs out of energy, that's when you're going to be forced to cast it and use however much damage it built up in that time. And the more energy you have, the more devastating the Dread Mirror is going to be. So And also, since her third ability restores 25% of max energy, the more energy you have, the more will be restored by her third ability, again making her abilities way more spammable to the point where one bloodletting, or maybe two bloodlettings before you heal to full, are enough to fill a lot of energy, enough to cast several other abilities. Like maybe three times her fourth ability. Pretty cool. So again, Prime Flow is really important. Or Gaze is absolutely crucial for this particular build. I'll show you what I do with the other ones. And yeah, Archon Stretch instead of... You could use Prime Stretch instead, but many builds use Archon Stretch for, extra energy, even though she doesn't need energy, but it doesn't hurt. But you could put primed stretch? No, regular stretch, I mean, instead of Archon Stretch. And you'll have the same ability range, but you just won't have the secondary effect. But if you can put it, it doesn't hurt, Same as Archon Continuity, I would use Primed Continuity if you are not using any melee weapon that has Toxin. But it's here just in case I would ever use a melee weapon that has Toxin, and so I wouldn't have to put this on or off. I have enough capacity so I could use both of them. If you don't, you do you. You could just use Prime Continuity and regular Stretch instead. In the Exalted slot, I put Prime Sure-Footed for more reliability, because I don't always remember to put on the Dread Mirror, which does the same thing. But also, Dread Mirror only blocks knockdown from the front. This one will also prevent you from being knocked back from the back. So any stagger that happens from the back, this negates. Prime Sure-Footed is a top-tier Exilus slot option. But if you really are comfortable enough relying on the Dread Mirror front-facing negation, and if you are just in general not really worried about knockdown, you don't care about it, even though it's one of the most annoying things in the game, you could replace Prime Sure-Footed with probably more range would be better. So this is as far as the looter build, which with the strong CC from Petrify. Now we're getting into some other interesting builds. Nourish has some other unexpected synergies. So what we're doing with Nourish is we're replacing Orgaze with Bloodforge. What Bloodforge does is that whenever you use Bloodletting, her third ability that restores energy, you also completely reload your weapon. And it's not even a reload. So if you have Rivens that say you have to kill a certain amount of enemies without reloading, this works because it doesn't count as a reload. It just adds bullets into your magazine. It just fills your magazine without reloading. So this is really useful for weapons that have really high reload speeds, or if you're doing Rivens that have that require you to kill a certain amount of enemies without reloading your weapon. And in general, many weapons in the game are really powerful but have long reload speed time. So with this, you don't need to ever reload. So Akuva Zar is a perfectly viable weapon. Felarx is a completely viable weapon. You don't have to ever reload. Once you get down to low ammo, you just use Bloodletting, which honestly you're going to be using all the time anyway. So this is another essentially really powerful contribution to her weapons platform playstyle. Now, what Nourish also does, it has several effects. One of them, it gives you a buff, and while this buff is active, any energy generation effects get a multiplier. So I don't really want to go into too much depth about what Nourish does, but let's empty all of our energy for a second to just showcase this. Okay. That, by the way, I shot it at the ceiling and still things died over here, just to show you how crazy the range is on this. But now that Nourish is active, when I use my Bloodletting, I heal about half instead of 25%. I use a Bloodletting again, I heal almost to full. So it helps with the spammability of your abilities pretty significantly. And I want you to notice something pretty interesting. Now when I'm using my fourth ability, some of them are taking viral damage. Why is that? Well, because Nourish applies viral damage and status effect to your weapons. But since her first and fourth ability are technically, quote-unquote, weapons, it applies to those as well. So if I use my first ability, let's see if we're lucky. There we go. We got a viral hit there, a viral hit there. And it adds the damage of the damage that Nourish adds to weapons. It adds them to your abilities, making your abilities deal crazy amounts of damage relatively. So that's not all. I'm going to get into another interesting part in a second when I go over the mods. But it has a pretty lengthy duration, and it restores energy, and it imbues your weapon with viral damage so that your weapons will deal way more damage. As I said, she also is a very useful weapon platform warframe, not only a caster. But her first and fourth abilities are going to also benefit from the Nourish damage because these are considered weapons, and her talons will also benefit from Nourish. So just all around, this is a very good weapon platform build, but not only, because as I said, even as a caster, this is 100% viable. Nourish makes everything more spammy. You can spam your fourth ability a lot, and it deals extra damage because of Nourish. It applies viral procs, and viral and slash at the same time is a crazy combination. I'm not going to explain why, but in Warframe, viral slash is one of the best combos in the game of elements because they synergize with each other, they scale their damage very efficiently off each other. And Seeking Talons, not only does it deal slash damage and viral damage, it also adds slash procs, and any viral damage will generate a slash proc because of the side effect of Seeking Talons, because of the debuff. So the debuff says that any incoming damage gets turned into a chance to generate slash procs. So any damage they take from Nourish, from the explosion, which I didn't talk about yet, and from all other sources, are also going to add more slash procs. Viral and slash procs on enemies by just tapping one ability is insanely powerful. I don't think there are many warframes in the game that can apply both viral and slash with one ability. But Garuda is one of those, if not the only one. Okay, so now to the mods. Combat Discipline. The reason this is here, now I'll need to get into the last effect of Nourish, which is the explosion. So Nourish, whenever you take damage, you generate a viral status effect on enemies in a certain radius. So at the range that we have right now, the radius is 31.8 meters, pretty large. And it deals some minuscule amount of damage, but that's not important because what is important is that it can actually generate viral statuses. And as we said, viral statuses are amazing because they combine with slash procs, which both your talons do and your fourth does, and they play off each other and they deal tons of damage directly to enemies' health because of how slash and viral work together. So the way this explosion works is whenever you take damage, with a 2-second cooldown, internal cooldown on it, so it can only happen every 2 seconds, it generates a small viral nova around you. I'm not going to make the enemies deal any damage to me because Combat Discipline is going to do it by just killing an enemy. So whenever I kill an enemy, it deals the same AoE with a chance to deal viral procs. So I kill this enemy who got viral. This one got viral. This one got viral. This one got viral. They all got viral. I think it should actually be a guaranteed at least one viral status effect. Yeah, so this happens because Combat Discipline means you lose 10 health whenever you kill an enemy. And whenever you kill an enemy, the 10 health counts as damage, and that damage triggers the Nourish explosion. So now you don't really need to depend on taking damage to trigger it. Now it also just generates automatically pretty much every 2 seconds, because you're going to be you're going to keep killing enemies constantly. This is going to trigger pretty much every time it's off cooldown and you kill an enemy. So this is going to trigger very often. It's going to debuff all your enemies with viral procs, and this is going to deal slash procs and viral procs. It's just a crazy combo. This whole build is really, really nice. And like I said, the energy economy that you gain from Nourish is pretty important when it comes to quality of life and spammability. Again, Arcane Blessing is because Combat Discipline makes you lose health, and you want to have a decent health pool so that you can kill a decent amount of enemies before you're going to need to fill your health back up with Molt Reconstruct. So this gives you basically a buffer that you can kill enough enemies before you need to recharge it. But Combat Discipline, you're going to only be using on a Nourish build. That's the only time where I'm not going to be using Brief Respite. But if you don't like the Combat Discipline synergy, you could just put Brief Respite, because the shield gating is insanely powerful as well. So you could go like this, or you could go with Combat Discipline, whichever one of them you think is more important. Either shield gating or adding viral procs to enemies around you more consistently. Okay. Now, and as I said, as a reminder, Nourish adds extra damage. So damage increase 62%. That damage increase is going to also apply to your Dread Mirror and your Seeking Talons. Breach Surge. Now we're getting into a pretty interesting build as well, but this is just a funny combo, a funny synergy that happens between her 4th ability and Breach Surge, which I'm going to showcase in a second. The build is pretty much identical to the Nourish one, of course with a different aura. It's going to be pretty much the same thing because everything is pretty essential in this build. But what this does is it would automatically kill any sufficiently large or dense group of enemies. So to make this best, let me just clear everything first. Let me grab my pet, which I took off to make it more consistent. Let's generate these enemies. Okay, so use your 4th ability, then you use Breach Surge, then you use your 4th ability again. Oh, look what happens. They just die. Let me try that again. So, 4th ability, Breach Surge, and enjoy the fireworks. You might be wondering what the hell's going on. Well, her 4th ability, like I said, debuffs enemies, and that debuff says that whenever an enemy takes damage, they get slash procs. Breach Surge debuffs an enemy, and it says that whenever they take damage, they send a Surge Spark. So whenever a Surge Spark from Breach Surge hits an enemy, it will generate a slash proc. That slash proc is going to deal damage to that enemy, which is going to generate a Surge Spark. That Surge Spark is going to hit an enemy and trigger it to get a slash proc. That slash proc is going to deal damage and trigger a Surge Spark to seek another enemy, and it just chains infinitely for as long as they both have enough duration. So we could even start with Breach Surge and then 4th ability. Same thing. Yep. So any sufficiently large group of enemies, even in Steel Path, it just completely erases everything. Because even if it doesn't, just give it a little bit more time, and then that combo... And by the way, look, the damage keeps ticking up higher and higher each time the cycle continues. So it starts with a few hundreds, then it gets to hundreds of thousands. Right? Because Breach Surge has a multiplier to the damage. So whatever damage generated the Surge Spark gets multiplied. And then the Slash Proc preserves that damage. And then when it generates another Surge Spark, it's going to multiply on itself again. So this kind of combo between these two abilities is kind of funny. This is completely viable, by the way, in various missions. And because Breach Surge has its own crowd control in defense missions, or stuff like that, where you could just stand in one spot and just spam Breach Surge for 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 4, keep going like this. And note how long you're also immune to damage while this is all going on because of your fourth ability. Yep, so you could just keep doing this, and eventually everything around you, even in Steel Path defense missions, just gets deleted. But it takes longer the higher level the enemies are, so at level cap, this is going to take a while to kill everything. But in general, I think this is a pretty useful build if you like Breach Surge. A lot of people don't like it because it's kind of memeing at this point. But anyway, this is a completely viable build. I've tried it out in various Steel Path missions, and it just melts enemies there like crazy. Anyway, I think that's going to be it. I'm pretty sure I didn't forget anything. If I did, I'll probably mention something about it in the comments. Have a good one.